I think I'll get started. Welcome to our economic dialogues for June. I'm Jack Davis, Crops Business Management Field Specialist out of our Mitchell Regional office. And there's my email and office phone number. You can also reach me on my cell phone at any time, which is 605-354-2881. So that is fine too. And email is always a good way to reach us too. So I'm going to talk today, and then Tong's going to talk a little bit on conservation practices and economics that go along with that. So I'll get started here. I'm going to look at highlights of the June World WASDE report, or World Ag Supply and Demand Estimates, and just taking a look at our 2020 balance sheet. They raised corn exports forecast by 75 million bushel to a total of 2.85 billion bushels. No change in the projected feed usage. That's still a pretty good usage, and probably expecting some slowdown with the prices, but a lot of those livestock are in place, so things will still have to be fed to them. Raised ethanol usage by 75 million bushel to a total for the year of 5.05 billion. And our travel or ethanol usage is back to within a couple percent of what it was in 19. That's a hard comparison to 20 because we had shut everything down as far as travel and a lot of our ethanol usage. But that's back to within a couple percent of what it was in 2019. And as we get rolling through summer vacations and stuff, we would expect that to probably pick up some. So therefore, the raise in the forecast. Lowered projected carryover by 150 million bushel to a total of 1.107. So that leaves us stocks to use ratio of 7.4, really the lowest since it's been since 2012. So positive for that current corn crop that we're finishing out selling and using up here. So looking at the crop that we just planted, yield held steady at 179.5, which is kind of our trend line yield for the year. So that would give us a total production of 14.9 billion bushel, or almost 15 billion bushel. That's unchanged from our May estimate. And we'll see, we have the big report coming up at the end of the month on actual acreage that got planted. Of course, very good conditions for the most part in planting as far as dryness, not too wet as we'd been facing the last couple of years. So could probably see an increase in acreage. We'll just have to wait and see where that falls out. Ethanol usage up 5% from our 2020 at 5.2 billion. And exports down, with our price being higher, probably less exports. And exports in 2020 of this crop that we're using up are very strong. So we had a large increase there. So expecting that to probably fall off in our new crop. Still pretty tight on our ending stocks. That decrease moved all the way through. So 135 million bushel less from our May estimates, and that puts our stocks to use down at 9%. Still pretty tight, and of course that could go lower if our crop doesn't produce what we have predicted here. So just how that 2020 crop shrunk throughout its, as it was planted and grew, and as we've gotten it sold off. So really has shrunk down from when those first reports came about. And just looking at corn ending stocks to use of total use over the different years, over the different harvest years. And as you can see, we are back to that low of 7%, which we were in 2012. and 13 we were at 9%. We're kind of right in that range, and gosh, our market kind of went right up to that. And this week, of course, we've had the fairly hard sell-off, just kind of a risk-off situation, and maybe hit some technicals, and people decided to get out and take a break from it a little bit. So looking at just our South Dakota cash corn monthly price received, and I just drew out some averages there for different time periods. As you can see, 2008 through 11 was 388. Our heyday average was 544, with quite a bit being above that, but that was the average for those years. And then 15 through 20 was a tough one. That was at 328. And in May now we are right at averaging 705. I think it did have an average here for what we sold for the year, if I can find it in my notes. I may not be able to. I believe it's right at 560 if we took the average for 21. Yeah, I scratched it down somewhere, and I'm not seeing it right now. But currently, that average in May is right at was 705. Okay, just looking at the crop conditions. So looking at good and excellent, or excellent and good, however we want to say it. And the columns are for 2021, and the lines that are filled in, the areas that are filled in, that's from 2012. So just did a comparison back to that drought year, and what percentage of our corn was in excellent and good, and at what point of the year it fell off. So there's on a national level, and where we're really behind is in South Dakota and North Dakota. And then I listed some of the other states. I got 4 states listed there. So 2 other states, Michigan and Missouri, that are both really poor and probably dragging down the nation. They account for, those 4 states together account for 16% of the planting intentions, so of planted acres. So a substantial amount, if we're hurt really bad in all of those states, it'll make a difference. So just wanted to show that and where we are. And I just compared it to 2012. So looking at our soybeans, I'm going to switch here, and looking at the soybean 2020 balance sheet. Reduce the soybean crush by 15 million bushels. No change in the export forecast. And our carryover then increased to 135 million bushels. So our stocks to use went up a little bit. It's at 2.9 versus the May, which was at 2.6. No change in the market year average price. So looking at 2021, our production is expected to be 4.4 billion bushels, which would be up 7% from 2020. Crush up about 2%. Projecting strong growth in biofuel use of soybean oil. We'll see how that plays out as we go through the new year. Exports probably a little less, again, strong exports in 2020, so projecting a smaller amount in our new crop coming up. Ending stocks increase a little bit. The stocks to use ratio is up just a point at 3, and that's market year average price projected currently at 13.85 for our new crop. So still very tight, and if we have a tough growing year, that's surely going to change going forward. Again, things that we got coming up, we got that June report coming up, so acres could probably increase. But if you look around South Dakota and North Dakota, we here for sure would feel like yield's probably going to be off quite a bit, currently anyway. We'll see what happens as we go through the growing year. So again, just the ending stocks as they were projected throughout the year. You know, we started out, gosh, in August of last year, we were even thinking that we still were looking at a pretty good yield. You know, soybeans looked good. And then we just hit that dry, super hot and kind of dry August and September, and the yield just fell off. You could really see them going backwards at that time if you were out scouting in the field. Again, looking at the ending stocks to use in the blue and over on the right-hand side, showing that percentage. Again, back to that time frame of in 12 and 13. So we're right down in that level when we had such high prices. And really probably going to stay there at least this year and probably next year till we get our 22 crop growing. So we'll see how prices play out. So quick look at the crop conditions, and these are of last week. So this comes out on Monday afternoon if you're not familiar with it, but just letting you know that this comes out Monday afternoons about, I'm thinking 3 o'clock or so, and it gives a crop progress and a conditions report. So that's, you know, something that's really going to be watched. I think we had a sell-off really partly in anticipation of the forecast that's coming, and we'll see if that plays out over this weekend. If we get some rains or if the forecast changes any. Right now, I think at least in my area, the forecast is not, I mean, there's a chance of rain, but the amounts are small, and it sure seems to be missing us right now. Now that's a small spot, but the market will really be paying attention to that as it comes forward, because I think it bet a lot this week on improving conditions. So we'll see how that goes. And again, comparing it to 2012. So we'll look at South Dakota, and this we had North Dakota and South Dakota are the two states that are probably in the worst condition as far as soybeans go. And they account for about 14% of the soybean acreage, as far as intentions are concerned, is in North Dakota and South Dakota. I guess I would say conditions were well enough or dry enough. Dry being a positive as far as planting was going, but then it kind of turned cold on us, and I think emergence was a problem, and now we've been hot. So I think that's a lot of what's driving those conditions. Just poor emergence. It got cold. A lot of guys have switched to try and plant beans about the same time they're planting corn, and I don't know, it just not working out. And of course, North Dakota, they were probably dry, even almost too dry in their planting conditions. So really kind of poor emergence, I feel, in the fields that I've seen. The Drought Monitor released on Thursday, it actually expanded from the week before a little bit and expanded in intensity. This is just showing the corn areas that are in drought, and as it's stating, 41% is experiencing the drought. So market-wise, I think probably just they wanted to take some risk off and felt that the premium had gotten too strong. We got some positive forecasts coming up, and I would say it's hinging more on what happens in this area of the drought in Iowa, southwest and southeast Minnesota, and over into this area. Nebraska, they're dry, but also they're a lot under irrigation as far as their corn. So, and as I'd heard this before, but I heard it again this week in some of the Twitter feeds, guys say they've never lost a corn crop in June. So I think that might have been some of taking the risk off. It's tough right now, but the corn is up, it's growing, and it's not using as much moisture, and it's fine, and it's going, at least here in South Dakota, it's kind of going down and grabbing it, but boy, it's going to need it as we keep growing and the heat, if the heat continues. Soybean area and drought, pretty similar to corn, about 36%. So one more thing I got is just review on crop insurance prices. So compared to 2020, we're on corn, we're 60 cents above where we were last year, and harvest price could end up higher yet. We'll wait and see. And soybeans just showing there almost $1 above, or actually a little more. And again, we'll see, just got listed there what the time frames are and the contracts that we look at for harvest price. And then the higher of two will be what the indemnity price is set at. So just a reminder of those and where they're at. And that is what I have. I think we really had this sell-off this week. Part of it, we just had some negative news and probably had reached a top, and was time to kind of take a break. My feeling is that the fundamentals have not really changed. And unless we do see some rains actually come out of these forecasts that are put in place, the fundamentals have really not changed at all. As far as our growing conditions are concerned, it's still tough. Still a lot of area in drought probably still expanding, and we'll see just how that forecast plays out or what really develops from that. Other things I think kind of hit at the same time, the interest rate talks, kind of change funds' minds or money managers' minds. The renewable fuel standard waiver talks kind of put a scare in things. And again, the forecast, dollar was quite a bit higher this last week. And China liquidated a bunch of their futures position, trying to cheapen up grains in China for their farmers. So those are some of the things that hit and drove the kind of the major sell-off. And once that ball got rolling, it really rolled yesterday. I believe we're up today, and maybe cooler heads prevailing. So we'll see. And like I say, in my mind, the fundamentals really have not changed much. The report did show that we maybe not going to be quite as short, but boy, it's still really short on soybeans. We're back to where we were in that 12 and 13 time frame. So, and the same for corn. So I would say don't panic. If you're in a situation where you're buying, you may want to think about that as we took this little break, and then kind of watch it over the weekend and see what happens. I'll show my contact information. That's what I have. I'll stop my sharing and see if there's any questions at all. Go ahead, Kevin. You have a question?
Yeah, Jack. I'm with Dakota Farmer Magazine, so thank you for the great presentation. And question kind of off topic, but we had our staff meeting this morning. We were talking about shortages of ag chemicals, seed. Are you hearing anything? And I mean, there's been talk that it could prolong into 2022, thus possibly changing some cropping plans as we look forward. I know we're concerned about 2021 right now, but have you heard anything?
I have a little bit, and I talked this spring to some co-op suppliers. Okay, so these were suppliers, and mostly in co-op situations. And he said there were some chemicals that they were possibly going to have problems with. They were okay because they had purchased and had taken delivery. So it kind of depended on that a little bit. I haven't heard anything on seed wise. Seed, I think they were okay. I didn't hear anything different that way. It was more on the chemical side.
Okay. And any thought on, did they concerned about as we look ahead, you know, if you can't get chemicals, you know, for certain crops ahead the next year? Or?
I haven't talked to him on that. And like I said, it was in the spring when I did talk to him. So it's been a couple months ago. I know, like, you know, just some parts and different things like that have taken place where it's just not available, or it takes a lot longer. Just kind of like the lumber and building industry. It's either shipping or not available. So I'm sure it could be happening a little bit.
Okay.
I'll do some checking around now that it's being brought up again. Or if you,
okay. Yeah, that was just fresh on our topic of our meeting this morning, so I thought I'd bounce it off you since I had you.
Yeah, just as an example, just a personal example, we actually bought an ATV this year and got it in January, but we started looking at it in October, and we thought we'd have it before the end of the year. And it didn't come in until this dealer normally gets 20 to 30 of them, and they only got 4 last year. So it's a real thing. I was also talking with another dealer, and he was we're talking iron stuff now. So he does short line stuff, and where he was buying some of his or getting some of his products, they had like a 4-day time period to say they wanted it or didn't want it. Otherwise, the price would change. And they said that would probably get shortened as the year went on. And with that being said, it could be that maybe it would go down, or it could go up, or they can't get it. So any of those could happen. So just I think all, you know, getting these supply chains back in order, back in place, and back running up, plus the manufacturers getting going again. I think it's in all of ag, really.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So Tong, I guess if you're ready, can you share?
Yes, let me share.
There, it's good.
Okay, so you can see it?
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes. I'm going to mute mine and.
Okay, so today my topic is about the cover crop economics in South Dakota. I'm an advanced production specialist from South Dakota University. So the objective of today's talk is, because profit change could have a substantial influence on the conservation practice adoption. So my presentation will cover some of our recent studies on cover crop economics in Eastern South Dakota. So I'm going to cover 3 studies. One is based on our producer survey in 2018 and 2021. So I want to see how the producer perception of cover crop benefits and the profitability change. And the other one is experimental study, is carried out in East South Dakota. This one is without grazing, and the third one is another experimental study, but this time has a grazing component in it. So we want to just compare those three studies and see whether there's some trend we can find from it. So here is the South Dakota Farmer Survey area. We can see that this is focused on the corn growing areas and focused on East South Dakota. And you can see that black border, it has the counties we have surveyed. So this is a comparison based on 2018 and 2021 survey. So in 2018, we received actually 708 respondents to the 2018 survey. And in the 2021 survey, we sent out the survey only to those respondents in 2018. And in 2021, we received 350 responses. And for the cover crop question, for this question, I think for both of the surveys, we have 300 people respond to both survey questions on the cover crop usage. So here is a distribution by the years. We can see that we break it into several categories: less than 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, and 10 plus years, and not adopted yet. So compared to survey, we can see that 2018, because this is a same pool of farmers, 49% of farmers haven't adopted cover crop yet. And in 2021, 3 years later, this actually percentage have dropped by almost 7%. And meanwhile, we can see that there is an increase in the percentage of people who have used it for less than 3 years and 3 to 5 years. So we can see that between those 3 years, the people who have used it, started to use it, have increased. So this is consistent with the trend by the NASS survey. So we can see a slight increase over the past 3 years. And if we ask people about their views on profitability change due to the usage of cover crops, we can see the 2 years are very similar. So most people feel like their change is within 5%, and the percentage for 2 years are very similar. And about 20% people feel there is an increase in profit by 5 to 10%, and like 2 or 3% feel there is an increase by 10%. The other feel there is a reduction in profit. So this is a comparison of 2 years is very similar. But if you compare it based on the usage status instead of by years, so here we use the 2018 survey. So we divide people into 5 groups based on their usage status. So the first group has never used, and the second group used less than 3 years and up to 10 years and more. So we break their opinions into 3 categories. The red bar shows people have perceived there is a reduction by 5% in profit. And then there's a light bar in the middle, shows very little change. And then the green bar shows there is a more than 5% increase. So we can see the green bar, like there is a steady increase from 16% to 40%. So this shows when the years of usage have increased, people's perception of cover crop profitability have steadily increased as well. So this is based by years of usage. And another comparison is based on whether they have pasture or no pasture. So the reason we do this is because with pasture, there is a possibility, the cattle is grazing on the pasture and their cattle could utilize the cover crop in the wintertime for grazing purpose. So we can see people who have pasture, they perceived a general increase in the profit change. So here I have a red line. This red line is marked with a no profit change. And this green bar shows people have pasture actually perceive a slightly increase in profit, but then people who have no pasture perceive a decrease in profit. So we can see the difference between people who have potential for grazing and people might not have the cover crop for grazing purpose. Their opinion are different. And we also ask people about their perceived benefits associated with the cover crops. So here are the several listed benefits, such as improved soil health, increased water infiltration, helps with crop livestock integration, suppress weeds, reduce fertilizer inputs, and then increase cash crop yields. So here the 3 means they agree with those benefits. And to the left means there is a disagreement, and to the right means there is a strongly agreement. And we break people into 3 categories as well. Here we have the non-adopters on the top. In the middle, we have people use it less than 3 years, and the dark green shows people have used it for 6 years or more. So we can see that for different benefits, people who use it for different years have a different agreement. So I actually ranked it based on the degree of agreement. So improved soil health and increased water infiltration is the 2 items that people shows the most agreement upon. And if we look at it, there are several items. For example, this one, the suppresses weeds. We can see that people who use it actually agree with it, but the non-adopters, they don't agree with it. There is a discrepancy between the people's opinions on it. And here, this one reduces fertilizer inputs. So this one, the non-adopters and the people who use it for a very short time, less than 3 years, their opinions are similar. They mentioned that it wouldn't reduce fertilizer inputs. But people who use it longer for 6 and more years, they show agreement with this item. Similarly, with the increase in cash crop yields, we can see that people use more years, agree more. So basically, there are those items that is suppress weeds and reduce fertilizer inputs. We can see that usage of more years definitely increase people's agreement on those benefits. But the soil health and water infiltration, we can see even people who have adopted for a short time, they agree with these benefits as well, but just a slightly lower degree. So those are the benefits with the cover crops. And so that summarizes our survey results. So I'm going to also introduce the farm research results in the Southeast Research Farm. So here you can see this farm location. So it's located in Beresford, South Dakota, on the southeast corner here. So first of all, I want to introduce the impact of cover crops without grazing. So for the without grazing experiment, we have 2 tillage systems. One is no-till, one is the conventional tillage. So the no-till plots have begun in 1991. However, the cover crop experiment introduced much later in 2013. And we use the data from 2014, 2018 for the economic comparisons in this presentation. And the cover crop is the winter rye, was seeded immediately after corn harvest. And it was chemically terminated ahead of soybean planting. So this study also have different rotation, 2-year, 3-year, and 4-year, but I just going to introduce the 2-year rotation here. The other rotation have very similar results. So we have the field data collected at the research site, which includes the timing and number of field operations performed. And we have the quantity of input as seed, fertilizer, pesticides collected, and crop yield collected. So the other price data we collected using the secondary price data. For example, we use USD NAS source for the 5 years. as the annual marketing prices, and then the annual input prices were obtained from the local agribusinesses, and then the machinery cost, we determined those from the 5-year average customer rates for North Dakota, because we don't have the South Dakota rate published here, so we use a neighborhood state. So the fertilizer and herbicide for all the plots, no matter it's cover crop plots or different no cover crop plots, they are applied at the same conventional rates. Because this is a short-term study, we didn't reduce the fertilizer input rate. So this is the production cost, average production cost over the years. So for the corn, we have different categories: the seed, fertilizer, pesticide, machinery, and driving, hauling, and crop insurance add up to nearly $400 per acre. And soybean is much lower, it's slightly over $200 per acre. That's the production cost. And for the cover crop winter rye, we have $41 per acre, which includes the seed cost. We don't have the fertilizer for the cover crop. We have the pesticide for termination, and we have the machinery cost for cover crop planting. So those are the cost of the different crops. And we compared the different combinations of treatment. So there are 4 combinations: cover crop, no-till, cover crop, conventional till, and no cover crop, no-till, and no cover crop, conventional till. And we compared their net returns, production costs, and gross returns. So if we look at those bars, we can see that compared with the no cover crop category cost, that is a red bar here, the cover crop have increased the cost. And the net return, so the gross return is slightly higher for the cover crop no-till category, but when it take care of the cost, we can see the net returns actually is the second highest with the cover crop and no-till. So the no cover crop no-till has the highest net returns. So this experiment is a transitional phase from the conventional fallow station to the cover crop systems. So it's only 5 years. So it may not reflect the long term. I think in the long term, it has the cover crop will reflect more benefits. Even so, we can say that if we incorporate cover crop in the 2-year rotation in combination with no-till, actually it provide an economically feasible option to diversify the system. So if you compare the 2-year cover crop no-till, the net return is 220 here, and compared with 237 with no cover crop is slightly lower, but still is higher than the conventional till site. Even with no cover crop, the conventional till result in 212. So we can conclude that this no-till with cover crop actually provide a feasible way to diversify the system. So 2 remarks from here, this experiment without the grazing component, we can see that the cover crop experiment actually generates lower net returns than the no cover crop treatment in the short term, if the benefits such as grazing livestock, nitrogen credits, and cost share payments, we didn't account for those, and then the net return is lower. If we incorporate the cover crop in a 2-year rotation, it actually diversifies the system and economically it's still feasible. So that's 2 remarks. So the next study is actually we incorporate cover crop usage on economic profitability with grazing. So again, it's short term. So we want to find out how the short-term grazing have an impact on economic benefits. So this time we have a 3-year rotation, a corn, soybean, and a rye rotation. So the cover crop is a blend. So it's planted after the rye crop on the 3rd year. So the grazing treatment was applied to the cover crop establishment in 2015 and 2016. So here I use a partial budget approach. So the partial budget approach is has an advantage that we don't need to collect all the data. We only need to collect the cost returns that has changed as a consequence of implementing the new practice. So basically, there are different categories we need to consider. First, what has added the income due to the change, and what reduced the cost? What are the reduced cost, and what are the reduced income categories and added cost categories? So for our cover crop experiment, we can think about if there is a cash crop yield increase, then we can add this as added income. But if there is cash crop yield decrease, we think about this as a reduced income. And reduce the cost. So because here we have a grazing cover crop by cattle, so reduce cost, we have the reduced forage cost. And then we could have in the longer term, a reduced fertilizer cost, reduce the herbicide cost. And then the added cost, because of grazing, we not only have the cover crop added cost, the seed cost, planting cost, termination cost, we also have the fencing cost, water tank cost, and the water hauling cost because of grazing. So here, together, we can add up the positive effect, that is the added income and reduced cost. And then we can add up the negative effect. So the net effect is a positive effect minus the negative effect. So within each of the items, we look into the detailed, the seed cost, first of all. Here we have 3 blends. One is the low residue legume blend, high residue grass blend, and the equal blend. So the low residue blend, basically there is a higher weight on the radish, pea, and the lentil. And then the high residue grass blend have a higher weight on the oats and the sorghum or Sudan here. So we have an equal blend, is a 50-50% of the 2 blends. So the total cost of those 3 blends are very similar. Basically is $24-25 for the seed cost. Besides the seed cost, we have the planting cost, about $17, and then termination cost, $11. So add up together, the total cost will be $54. And then the added cost has the fencing cost, and then there is the, these are the 2 items. For one is a wire, the post, about $14 per acre, and then there is a fence energizer, about $6 per acre. So add up to $20 per acre for the fencing. And then the water tank and the water hauling cost. So we assume there is a water tank of 600 gallon, and we assume there is a stocking rate of 40 head on a 40 acre, and the cattle weight is starting with 750 pounds over the grazing period on average. And then we have the water hauling cost. So here we, based on the 90 days of grazing time. The grazing time could be either shorter than that. So we assume 90 days because that might be the maximum time of grazing. So that's why we assume the maximum benefits from the grazing component. But the water hauling cost will be over $7 per acre over the 90 days. And on the reduced cost, we assume again, there is a 90 days stocking rate of 0.75 animal unit per acre. And we assume a forage price of $130 per ton. And then the forage dollars saved would be $114 per acre. Again, this forage value saved is depending on the number of days of grazing. If there are short days of grazing, this value will be lower. So we put all the numbers into our this partial budget form. There is a reduced forage cost, and then there is increased cover crop cost and increased fencing cost. So as the first year, if we take account of the those items, we have a total positive effect of $114 and total negative effect of about $88, and the net effect $26. So this is with the forage cost reduced. So we have net effect of $26 in the first year. And in the second year, if we assume we don't want to account for the fencing cost and water cost, tank cost again, because they last for at least 10 years, then we have an increased net effect of $52. And we account for other possible benefits. So this is not based on our experiment, but this is based on the, we took it from the SEER technical bulletin 2019. Basically, they mentioned that in the third year, there could be an increase in yield. So they assume there is a 2% increase in yield. If there is a 200 bushel yield per acre, and then 2% increase will increase by $14 based on the crop yield increase. And then they assume that based on the farmer survey data in the third year, there could be a decrease in the nitrogen usage and also a phosphorus usage as well. So together, there is a reduced fertilizer cost for $14 as well. And then the herbicide cost could be reduced by $10 based on the reduced passes or less expensive herbicide product. So there is a $10 decrease here. So the other didn't change from the second year. So if we account for those more benefits from the third year and onward, so then the net effect would be even higher, would be $90. So this again, we account for the forage reduction cost based on our 90 days grazing period. If this could be lower if we have a shorter grazing period. So based on our three studies, these are the concluding remarks. So the first one is certainly we found that cover cropping increased the production cost based on the additional expenses consistent of the seed cost, the planting cost, and termination cost. So those costs need to be incurred every year, no matter you have grazing component or not. So these are the increased cost portion. And the grazing cover crops by cattle actually provides an alternative option to offset some of those costs and increase farm revenue. So we found out the first year economic profit if grazing cattle by 90 days could increase by $26, and the second year could increase by $52 per acre, and the third year even more. And the number of cover crop usage years increase. We can see the soil quality could improve over time. I didn't introduce the soil portion, but the study does conclude that portion as well. So the yield will increase, and the similar studies have found there is a reduction in fertilizer herbicide cost can be expected after 3 years. So based on our experimental results and the survey results, we know that longer term cover crop usage are more likely to observe a profit increase. So those basically concludes our study based on those 3 studies. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Here is my contact information. And if you have any questions regarding the data or study method in the 3 studies, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for Tong?
Tong, I just asked real quick, what's your future research in cover cropping, where you're looking to head?
The cover cropping, I think, in the experiment side, currently we have the short term. So I think, when those experiments have I think that right now we have 5 or 6 years. When we have more data based on the longer term, I think we could have some longer term experimental study on the what has the cover crop impact the soil, impact the fertilizer requirement and the herbicide requirement. So there could be more economic data based on the experimental study. And for the the farmer study, we might ask them about the weather effect. So for example, there are more drought years, more weather extremes. So we want to find out whether the producer's incentive of using cover crops might change based on their perceived weather events. So that's two aspects I can think of. One is on the survey side of the producer's incentive to adopt cover crops based on the weather events, and the other is on the experimental side. As we use cover crop on the experimental field more longer time, there could be more data to carry out a longer term economic analysis. So basically 2 points. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and I think some other things that may be working on is like full season. So a few trying that where they're using a full season cover crop and grazing. Be more with livestock people, that they make that part of their rotation. I think those things will be coming up. You know, it might be a few years off before data's there, but those are some things.
Yeah, that's good direction. So Jack, you observed some people are using that, or there are some experimental studies?
I think there's some experimental studies starting or getting close to being started.
Okay, yeah, that would be a good direction to look into. Yeah, for the economic effect as well. So
yeah, and then seeing how that improves soil health.
Yes, yeah. Always we look together, the soil health and economic together, so that we can have a balanced conclusion. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in some of the Tong, and some of the stuff that we've done there, I would say for actual producers, there's probably not quite as much change because many of those already have livestock, would already have the fence, would already have the water. So they're not going to have, in practice, they're not going to have those. There are fixed costs to them already.
Okay.
So in practice, those people will see that benefit. Like you saw in our second year, they would see that right away in the first year because of those fixed costs, and there'd be no change in the fence and water situation for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume that people don't have fence already, but
right.
I understand. Yeah, most some people already have the livestock and the place. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I think that becomes fuzzy a little bit for farmers is, and when we're comparing these systems, is that a termination cost for the cover crop, or would you already have that burn down, that type of treatment, and is that any different? And I know you did show some reduced herbicide cost as we went for our cash crop.
Yes, that's a herbicide cost.
So in this one, it's pretty equal. We're about the same, say $12 and $10. Yeah, so a couple dollars per acre difference.
Yes.
And sometimes those might be, the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I incorporate this reduced herbicide cost only in the third year, not in the first and second year. So I think maybe in the longer term, it would be
definitely. I would say longer term that takes place, and for some it may be in that first year. They may be an equal cost. They'd have it, but they would also had to do some other type of burn down, even if they weren't using the cover crop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually mentioned that here. I didn't mention in detail, but they actually mentioned that termination cost for burnout.
Yeah. Okay, I missed that when you went through there.
Yeah. I didn't go through because there are too many things detail.
Right.
I just introduced the big one. So but there is a possibility. You don't need to account for this one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, any other questions for us today?
I do have a question. This is Kevin again. And forgive me if I missed this, Tong. Do you think your equations or the end result would change if or maybe you did look at specific cover crops, or were they all mixed cover crops? How much, if you would look at the individual, a radish versus a pea versus a lentil, would you see different net results?
The seed cost, I think in the other study, the first study without grazing, this one has the blend. But in the other study, we did actually the winter rye. So the winter rye cost is slightly lower. You can see that winter rye costs $41 per acre when we take account of seed, fertilizer, no, not fertilizer. So seed, pesticide, and machinery. So it's $41 per acre. So this one is actually, I think with the blend, it becomes more expensive. So I'm not sure, is that your question or?
Yeah, just looking at your, the later on study, and like I said, maybe I did miss it in your presentation, but the, when you were looking at the partial budget of utilizing cover crops, were you looking, were those blends or were those individual cover crops?
Oh, those are blends. Yes.
Those were blends.
Yeah, those are blends. Yes.
Do you think if you would have looked at individual cover crops at that, for that study, you see kind of the same net effect?
The individual, I think would be the cost would be lower, because the blends come up with 54, and the individual one comes at like $10 lower in the total cost. So I think the added cost will be a little bit lower. So I'm not sure if we have an individual, whether that affects grazing component, but there are definitely some changes. Yeah, those costs will change. And the forage cost, because we studied the reduced forage cost, it could change as well. Because this one is actually depends on, as I mentioned, grazing days. So those I think could change. I think this is a framework, but individual farmers, their numbers certainly will have slightly different numbers based on their the cover crop chosen species and chosen, and then whether they have fence, whether they have a water tank already, and how long they graze the cattle, and how about their cash crop yield. If they have different precipitation, maybe the yield will change differently. So I think that's this framework is the same, but I'm sure the exact number will change slightly, depends on, for example, as you mentioned, the cover crop species. So,
okay.
And I think also, Kevin, that many of them are using a blend. I think part of that's a risk reduction, in that you never know what the weather's going to do. And I think, and I don't know the reason, the agronomic reason enough, but that's part of it on the blend is just take some of that risk out of it. And when you go to those and hear the people talk on that have done long term, most of them are pretty much using a blend, even for grazing. And I think even when they're trying to target a specific issue, the guys that have been at it a long time, maybe targeting a specific issue with their soils, I think they're still using some types of blend.
Okay.
If that helps. And I don't know all the reasons behind it, but it tends to be a blend, and a big part of that is the weather risk.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I also heard that a blend has different benefits. Some of the the plants have benefits for the more for this like just a different benefits, but the cost will be higher. I think there is I forgot to mention, there is seed mixture fee of 7 cents per pound. So there it increased the cost as well from the blend.
Yeah, and the other thing, like if you're using the low residue legume blend, that will help. If you might target that more so if you were trying to reduce what am I want to say, the residue. If you're trying to reduce residue, you would use those higher use a low residue blend, legume blend. So there's some of that, but I think they still tend to blend them.
Okay.
Well, if there's not anything else, we'll conclude for today. And it is Tong and I always welcome questions, either through email or contact us. So thank you for joining us today. And we'll see you next month.